Hi everyone, your local hipster here, and it's time for another installment in our monthly series known as the Album Review Catch-Up, where I go over albums that I might have missed over the past month. I review them in a quick capsule-like style to catch up on my schedule. There are 10 albums, because we are doing 10 this year instead of 5. And with all that said and done, let's get started. Lil Wayne Funeral, kind of an out-of-the-blue album, in all honesty. I wanted to review this album because Lil Wayne was a big part of my life growing up. He was a very prominent figure in the aughts during the bling era, and he does have a unique personality and a style that is undoubtedly his. Going into this record, I really was hoping that it wasn't just some kind of bloated blah, but really that's the only way I can describe this album. It's bloated, it's long-winded, it does not need to be this long. It's over 20 tracks long. It's why. And I would forgive him if these songs were interesting, but unfortunately they aren't. What you're getting here is more of like a watered-down version of what Lil Wayne used to be. Not terrible, not horrible, but something really forgettable. I just wanted a lot more from this record, even if it is very long. I wish Lil Wayne would really kind of work on songs and not just try to make another banger, another banger, another banger. Hooks need to be there, maybe some features here and there, but honestly, it's just another Lil Wayne project. And it's so sad because Lil Wayne has some really good songs, but in a sea of his entire discography, what does this do? This doesn't do much. Yeah, it's a C- for me. Louis Tomlinson, a member of One Direction, or formerly a member of One Direction, solo debut, and it's not like a travesty. It's not that bad. It's not like Liam Payne's album. Ugh. However, I struggle to find a personality within this album. This entire album sounds really dated too. If you were to ask me, I would have told you that this album came out in like late 2000s, early 2010s. This also really sounds like a One Direction album, just with one member. Sure, it's feel-good pop that makes you feel good, but it's nothing more than that. And I assume if you like that style, you're going to eat this album up. And certainly, I don't hate this album, but honestly, it's nothing more than a C. It's just very middle of the road for me. And while it does sound nice on one hand, on the other, it's very forgettable. Another pop star, I guess this time more stable or more well-known. I've always appreciated Kesha and her work. I liked the song TikTok, and I did like her last album, Praying. I felt like that was a really huge step in the right direction for her. And while I don't think this album is bad necessarily, and I do appreciate that she is trying to make music that she really wants to make, it can sound a little dated at points too. I'm not disappointed per se, I just wanted to like this more. If this was cut down to a good select number of songs, 11 or 12, then maybe I would enjoy it more. It's kind of bloated too. It's a pretty long-winded project, and for just pop bangers, I feel like short, concise, and brief is something you want to go for. There are moments on this record that I really do like. I think the opening track to this record starts it off pretty nicely. And kind of like the last album that I talked about, it has some feel-good pop tunes and some very anthemic pop tunes as well. The Big Frida feature on the song Raising Hell is really cool, and I like the feature that she does with Sturgill Simpson, Brian Wilson, and Warble. Father-Daughter Dance is a nice tribute to her father that she would have wanted to be around. And overall, there are some really nice ideas implemented on this album, but for me personally, I wanted to like this a lot more if she would have given me just less material, because I was kind of getting fatigued by the end of the album. It's 16 tracks long. It's just over 50 minutes. And while the runtime of the album is not entirely long compared to some other albums, it kind of seems long for Kesha's case. Other than that, I think it's a worthy mention. Check this out. A very solid B-. Frances Quinlan of Hop Along fame decided to release her debut solo album. It's interesting to say the least. I like her vocal delivery on all of the tracks. I think her prowess on these songs is very admirable. Something very recognizable too, but the instrumentals are very bleak. Ugh, they're very plain. And when you have an instrumental this, I guess, milquetoast and this boring, your vocals kind of get lost, and the entirety of the song and the entirety of the album is kind of lost with me as well. Get some better instrumentals, because these instrumentals need to complement her vocals very well. And unfortunately, this is not the case. I don't know. I'm not feeling as strongly as some other people are on this album, but I mean, there are some noteworthy mentions, and this album doesn't take up too much of your time. It's only 9 tracks, 34 minutes. So I guess I can give her that, but honestly, I can't really see anything else other than just a regular kind of singer-songwriter album, unfortunately. I wish I had more to say about this, but I honestly don't. It's just very forgettable for me. That's it. That's really about it, honestly. And that's why I didn't do an actual full review on this, because I don't even have a lot to say in an album review catch-up. It's just kind of like boring instrumentals, good vocals, short, concise, doesn't take up too much time, but honestly, it's very forgettable. Yeah, it's a very strong C+. Very strong. Royce da 5'9", the Allegory, kind of boil my thoughts down to this being very long-winded. The messaging is actually pretty good for the most part on this album. I think it's kind of consistent. Obligatory anti-vax lines are bad, although I do have like a, not much of a personal antidote, but kind of a, I don't know how to describe this, but one of my, I guess, family friends actually had a kid, and she was at that time against vaccination because she thought that they would cause autism. And then her child got autism. Her rest of the kids got vaccinated as well. So here's the thing. Anti-vax and the ideology is really dumb. And of course I understand where he's coming from, the distrust of government officials and etc., etc. Other people have talked about this as well. It doesn't take that much time to research the statistics and the facts. You're just going to spread misinformation and bullshit around, and I'm not going to really care about it. But all that aside, the album itself isn't bad. It's actually one of his stronger efforts yet. It has a pretty consistent theme throughout most of the record. I wanted to like this more, I really did, because Royce da 5'9" is great at rapping and producing, but I'm not going to really agree with the ideology that you're spitting out on this album. But still a worthy mention. I would tell you to give it a shot if you're curious, or just give it a shot either way. It is a little long-winded. Cut these down, man. This does not need to be 20 tracks long. I would love to see him come through with a more concise effort next time around. For me personally, a very light B-. So I was kind of interested going into this new Loathe album because it was getting a lot of attention, a lot of buzz online, and I saw, alternative metal, gent, and metalcore were the genres, as well as shoegaze as well, if I believe. Now, I don't mind the experimentation done on this record. However, some songs are really, what's the word? They are lost. Potentially. The potential in the songs are gone, and once you really have too many ideas on an album, they don't coalesce into anything. They just kind of exist in their own little niche. My take on this album might not be the same with everyone else's, but this album kind of experiments a little too much, and it doesn't have any sense of direction. There are some really good songs on here, but at the halfway point of this record, I was really much tuning out, because it kind of felt like what Loathe were doing was kind of throwing a bunch of ideas at a wall, and nothing was really sticking with me. It was just kind of sliding down and leaving a trail. Ideas that sound interesting but aren't fully fleshed out. Still, it's an interesting album. I would recommend you check it out, but I am definitely not head over heels for this. I'm really kind of upset that there were some really good ideas on this record, but it just didn't pan out all that well. So a very light B- at that. Eden, No Future. I was interested going into this record because I follow Kai Whiston on Twitter, and he was talking to Eden. I think they're friends, and he said, yo, Eden said this is going to be so big. It's going to be the biggest thing in the world. So I was kind of interested. I'm like, okay, this sounds interesting. I'm willing to check it out. And, you know, there are some tracks on this that I find enjoyable. As an indie-tronica record, it can get very boring, though. Especially since this album is 19 tracks long, just under an hour of materials on here. This album does not need to be this long. It does not need to be this long. It could easily just be like a 12-track album at 30 minutes. Because there are some very interesting ideas on this album. The muted indie-tronica approach that Eden takes with the R&B-esque vocals are really nice. And I see them working for a 12-track, 30-minute album. I don't see them working for an hour album. The song Streams also, that error sound from a Mac, it haunts me. And I think he could hone in his songwriting a lot more. Again, interesting ideas happen on this record. I'm not hating this record as some people, but again, a lost potential thing. There is great ideas on this album, and you can cut down a chunk of them to a really solid album. But as a whole experience, there are moments. I like some moments, but it doesn't coalesce into anything better than the sum of its parts either. Yeah, for me, it's a C+. Check it out if you're curious. I think some people will like it, no doubt, but it's a little long-winded for me. BTS, Map of the Soul 7. You know, BTS are the pop phenom of late 2010s, early 2020s, and I don't see them kind of going further than just being a huge phenomenon. But if they can pull through with an album that I think is worthwhile, then I would be down for that. Unfortunately for me, this album just wasn't it. I think adding the Persona EP was a little unnecessary, and this album is also really long too. Surely it will satisfy the fans of BTS, but I mean, honestly, most anything will. The Sia feature's extremely short. It could have been thrown out because it wasn't there. And I get bored listening to this album because it's kind of the same ideas over and over and over again. I think vocally each member of BTS delivers very nicely. I do like that about this album, is that the vocals can work in their favor, can work in their benefit. But the instrumentals kind of seem a little dated and behind the curve. And for BTS, that's a bad thing because they need to be ahead of the curve. They need to be the pop vanguard that they should be. They should be forward-thinking, and they should be inventive. So, not necessarily bad of an album, very long-winded. I get bored listening to this, and it will definitely appease the fans. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know everything about, you know, K-pop and the industry. However, I do know when I like something and when I don't like something, or when I feel like something is middle of the road. And again, surely this will satisfy the fans, but it's not satisfying me enough. A very worthy C. Ozzy Osbourne, Ordinary Man, which, for one, he is anything but. I was excited going into this record because it's Ozzy Osbourne, dude. And there are some really interesting moments on this record, and I don't doubt that the people who really love Ozzy Osbourne as a musician will enjoy this album. For me personally, it did kind of feel like your usual run-of-the-mill Ozzy Osbourne kind of material. The riffs, well, I'm not telling him that he needs to work on his riffage, if that's a word. They can run a little weak for Ozzy. This man used to churn out some amazing riffs like it was nothing. I'm not gonna blame him though, he is really late in his career, but if you are curious about this Ozzy Osbourne record, check it out. Ozzy fans are definitely gonna love this, and I understand why, because it is a good album. The Post Malone feature is also pretty cool too, and there are some pretty cool songs on here. As a whole album experience, it wasn't memorable for me personally. I also wanted more from this record since it's been so long since an Ozzy Osbourne album. Nothing exciting, nothing intriguing, nothing forward-thinking, nothing crazy. But hey, it's still a good record. Check it out if you're curious. A very strong B-. Tricot with Makkuro if I'm pronouncing that correctly, a Japanese quartet that make power pop and math rock. An interesting formula, no doubt. An interesting album, no doubt either. I'm not loving this as much as other people are. However, I still like a good chunk of songs on here. No denying the technicality of this record. I also like the angle that they're doing this at. They're adding pop elements, progressive pop elements to a math rock sound. The vocals are definitely pop inspired, and of course the production is math rock inspired. It's complex, it's intricate, it's interesting. That's one thing I like about this record. It's very rhythmic, but yet it's really technical and complex. And I love the very rhythmic, energetic angle that this album has. It's something a lot of post-hardcore bands need to listen to. As a whole, this album is really interesting. Don't miss out on this. However, I feel like I'm missing out on something because a lot of people love this record, but for me personally, I'm only liking it a good deal, but I'm not head over heels for a lot of the songs. There are weaker moments, no doubt, but as a whole album experience, it's something to check out. A very solid B. Also, the album cover is something that kind of stopped me from doing an entire album review. Please don't have an entirely black album cover, thank you. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like, comment, share, do whatever you want. Let me know how I can improve future videos down below. And remember, this is only my opinion, because music is subjective.